Mia Carter had always believed in second chances. As a social worker in a small coastal town, she had dedicated her life to helping struggling families rebuild after hardship, offering them hope where others saw only brokenness. But as she stood in the dim light of her kitchen, carefully layering fresh pasta sheets for a homemade lasagna, she wondered if second chances were meant for her, too. She had spent the past few months trying to hold her marriage together, but lately, it felt as if she was the only one trying. Ryan Dawson, her husband, had once been the man of her dreams, gentle, passionate about his work as a marine biologist, and completely devoted to her. They had spent their early years together dreaming about a future filled with adventure, family, and love. But ever since Patrick Dawson, Ryan's father, had moved into their home, things had changed. The warmth that had once defined her marriage was slowly replaced by cold stares and sharp words. And no matter how hard Mia tried to ignore it, Patrick's disapproval of her was eroding everything she had built with Ryan. Patrick, a retired military officer, had never made it a secret that he thought Mia was beneath his son. To him, a social worker was just a glorified babysitter, someone who wasted time fixing other people's problems instead of building a real future. He spoke of his late wife, a woman who had devoted her life to supporting him, cooking and taking care of their home. Patrick expected Mia to do the same, and when she didn't, the criticisms began. "You're always so busy with other people's kids. When are you going to focus on your own husband? Ryan needs a strong partner, not someone who comes home exhausted from dealing with lowlives all day." Every comment was a jab, and over time those jabs turned into real wounds. Mia could feel the shift in Ryan, how his father's words slowly became his own. Where Ryan had once admired her independence and passion, now he seemed to resent it. At first, the changes were subtle. He started questioning how she spent her time, making offhanded remarks about how much effort she put into her job while their own home was falling apart. Then, the criticisms became direct complaints. Her cooking wasn't up to his father's standards, she was too emotional, she wasn't a real partner, and worst of all, Ryan had stopped standing up for her. Mia had always been outspoken, but lately she had learned to bite her tongue. Every time she tried to defend herself, she saw the way Ryan's eyes flicked toward his father, seeking silent approval. She was losing him, and she didn't know how to stop it. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, Mia had decided to take control of her own happiness. She had discovered she was pregnant just a few weeks ago, and despite the tension in their home, she had hoped this news would bring back the man she had fallen in love with. She hadn't told Ryan yet. She wanted it to be special. She imagined his face lighting up, imagined him pulling her into his arms, promising to do better, to love her the way he used to. She had even bought a tiny onesie with Future Explorer printed on the front, a nod to Ryan's passion for the ocean. If there was ever a moment to remind him of the love they once shared, this was it. She set the table carefully, placing Ryan's favorite lasagna in the center, with a bottle of wine beside it, one that she wouldn't be drinking. She took a deep breath, smoothing down her dress, and tried to ignore the wave of nausea rising in her stomach. Morning sickness had been hitting her hard, but she had been hiding it well. Patrick couldn't know yet. He already thought she was weak. If he found out she was pregnant, she knew he would try to control every aspect of her life. No, this was something she had to share with Ryan alone. Just as she was about to call him to the table, she heard the front door open. Ryan walked in first, his face unreadable, but when Patrick followed closely behind him, Mia's stomach twisted. He wasn't supposed to be here. "Smells good," Patrick said, eyeing the table like a commander inspecting his troops. "Trying something new, Mia?" Mia forced a smile. Just wanted to do something special for Ryan. Patrick chuckled, sitting at the head of the table as if it were his house. "Let's hope it's better than last time." Ryan didn't say a word, just sat down across from her, rubbing his temples. He looked tired. The weight of his father's presence was suffocating, and Mia wanted to reach out, to take his hand and remind him of the man he used to be. Instead, she swallowed her words and started serving the food. Halfway through the meal, Patrick leaned in and whispered something in Ryan's ear. Mia saw it happen. The shift in Ryan's posture, the way his muscles tensed, the sudden change in his expression. His face darkened, his eyes turning cold. And then, everything fell apart. Mia barely had time to react before Ryan's chair scraped violently against the wooden floor as he stood up. His once warm blue eyes were now filled with rage, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The air in the room turned suffocatingly tense, the smell of lasagna and garlic suddenly making her stomach churn with nausea. "Is this true?" Ryan's voice was sharp, filled with an accusation she didn't understand. Mia blinked, her heart pounding in her chest. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Patrick leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a smug expression. He had planted the seed. Now he was waiting to see the damage it would cause. "Don't lie to me, Mia," Ryan spat, his voice shaking. "Are you cheating on me?" Mia's breath caught in her throat. Cheating? Her mind raced to piece together what had just happened, how dinner had suddenly turned into an interrogation. Then it hit her. Patrick. He must have told Ryan something awful. The whisper, the look in Ryan's eyes, the instant fury. It all made sense now. She opened her mouth to defend herself, to ask him why he would believe such a thing, but Ryan didn't give her the chance. Before she could utter a single word, his hand shot out, and the slap landed across her cheek. The impact was so sudden, so forceful, that Mia staggered back, knocking into the edge of the table. A burning pain spread across her face, and the room spun for a moment before she caught herself against the wall. Silence. The kind that pressed down so hard it felt like the walls themselves were closing in. Mia stared at Ryan, wide-eyed, her face stinging, her pulse pounding in her ears. She couldn't process what had just happened. The man she loved, the man she had trusted with her heart, had just hit her. Her stomach twisted violently, not just from the shock, but from the nausea that had been building all evening. And then, without warning, it happened. She lurched forward and vomited, right there in the middle of the dining room. The sound of retching shattered the silence. Ryan took a step back, his face contorted in a mix of disgust and realization. Patrick looked on, expressionless, as if he had already decided she was guilty and wasn't interested in any defense. But then something unexpected happened. Mia's purse had fallen from the chair, and its contents spilled onto the floor. Among them, a small, white plastic stick with 2 unmistakable pink lines. Ryan's face drained of all color. His breath hitched as he stared at the pregnancy test lying in the open, the same one Mia had planned to surprise him with tonight. His hands, the same hands that had just struck her, trembled at his sides. "Mia?" His voice was hoarse now, no longer filled with anger, but with something else. Fear, regret, horror. Mia reached up, touching her cheek where his hand had landed, tears streaming silently down her face. "I was going to tell you tonight," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's why I made your favorite dinner. I'm pregnant." The weight of her words hit Ryan like a blow to the chest. His mouth opened, then closed, as if searching for something to say, something to undo the damage he had just caused. Patrick's expression darkened, but for the first time there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. Maybe this wasn't the reaction he had planned for. Maybe even he hadn't expected his son to go this far. But whatever Patrick was thinking didn't matter anymore. Mia knew, in that moment, that everything had changed. Ryan took a hesitant step toward her, his hand reaching out, but Mia flinched away instinctively, her body recoiling from his touch. That was when she saw it. The horror in his eyes, the realization that he had just become the very thing he had sworn never to be. Before he could say anything else, before Patrick could twist the situation any further, Mia turned and ran. She grabbed her coat, ignored the burning in her cheek, the nausea still curling in her stomach, and bolted out the door. She didn't look back. She couldn't, because if she did, she wasn't sure if she would ever be able to leave. And she had to. Not just for herself, for the baby growing inside her. Mia didn't stop running until she reached Zoe Williams' apartment, her best friend and the one person she knew would take her in without question. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps as she pounded on the door, her hand still trembling from what had just happened. Within seconds, Zoe swung the door open, her brows furrowing in confusion before her gaze landed on Mia's bruised cheek and the tear-streaked look of devastation on her face. "Oh my God, Mia!" she whispered, stepping aside and ushering her in. The moment Mia crossed the threshold, she felt the weight of the night hit her all at once. The shock, the fear, the betrayal. She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands as sobs racked through her body. Zoe knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders. "What happened? Did Ryan?" Her voice trailed off as if she didn't want to say the words aloud. Mia could only nod. Zoe's face hardened. "That son of a—" She took a deep breath, reining in her anger before brushing Mia's hair back gently. "You're staying here. No arguments. You and the baby." The baby. Mia had barely allowed herself to think about the life growing inside her since she left the house. The moment she had always imagined, Ryan pulling her into his arms, overwhelmed with joy, had been replaced with violence and disbelief. She had tried so hard to earn his love again, to fight against Patrick's influence, but now she realized something chilling. It wasn't just about his father anymore. Ryan had made his own choice, and she had to make hers. The night passed in a blur. Zoe made her tea, wrapped her in blankets, and kept her phone away from her when it buzzed endlessly with calls from Ryan. Mia knew he was trying to explain, to apologize, but she couldn't bring herself to read his messages. What excuse could possibly justify what he had done? She had spent years excusing his behavior, convincing herself that the man she married was still there, buried beneath his father's expectations. But tonight he had crossed a line that she could never ignore. And worse, he had done it while she was carrying their child. The next morning, Zoe sat beside her on the couch, a fresh cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. "You need to tell someone," she said firmly. "A lawyer, the police, someone who can help." Mia let out a shaky breath. The idea of taking legal action against Ryan made her stomach twist with guilt and fear. Would he fight back? Would Patrick get involved? She could already hear his voice in her head, calling her dramatic, blaming her for pushing Ryan too far. But then she thought of the baby. She had sworn to protect this child, and that meant making sure they were never in danger again. Zoe placed a hand over hers. "Mia, you're strong, but you don't have to do this alone." Mia nodded, finally making the first real decision for herself in a long time. "I know," she whispered, "but I need time. I need to figure out what's next." And for the first time in months, she felt like she was finally taking back control. Ryan sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the weight of the past 24 hours pressing down on him like an anchor. The house was unbearably silent. No sound of Mia moving around, no quiet hum of her voice as she played music while cooking. Just emptiness. His gaze fell to the floor where her pregnancy test still lay, stark proof of what he had done. He had hurt his wife, his pregnant, the woman he had promised to love and protect. His stomach churned with nausea at the thought, his hands gripping his hair as the realization hit him like a tidal wave. He had become his father. He thought back to Mia's face after the slap, how she had flinched, the sheer terror in her eyes. It was a look he knew too well. He had seen it in his own mother's eyes when Patrick used to yell, used to break things. used to make her feel like she was nothing. Ryan had sworn he would never be that kind of man, but here he was, standing in the wreckage of his marriage, watching history repeat itself. From the kitchen he heard the unmistakable sound of ice clinking against glass. Patrick, of course. His father had made himself comfortable, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just planted the very lie that had torn Ryan's world apart. Ryan turned the corner and saw him standing by the counter, pouring himself a drink, his expression unreadable. "She left, didn't she?" Patrick said without looking up. There was no remorse in his voice, no concern, only smug certainty. Ryan clenched his fists. "You lied to me." Patrick finally met his gaze, his lips twitching into something that almost resembled amusement. "I told you what I saw," he said smoothly. "You chose to believe it." The words struck Ryan harder than any punch could. He had chosen to believe his father over his own wife, over Mia, the woman who had never given him a single reason to doubt her. His body tensed, rage simmering beneath the surface, but this time it wasn't directed at Mia. He took a slow step forward, voice low and dangerous. "Pack your bags." Patrick frowned. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Ryan bit out. "Get out of my house." Patrick let out a dry laugh, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "You're making a mistake, son. That woman has you wrapped around her little finger. You throw me out, and she'll tear you apart in court. You'll lose everything." Ryan's jaw tightened. He didn't care. He was done letting his father dictate his life, done letting him poison his marriage. He had already lost Mia. But maybe, just maybe, if he did this now, it wouldn't be forever. "Get out." Patrick's smirk faltered, but he saw it then, the finality in Ryan's expression. His son was no longer his to control. With a frustrated scoff, Patrick slammed down his glass and stormed toward the door. He paused, turning back one last time. "You'll regret this." Ryan exhaled shakily as the door clicked shut behind him. For the first time in his life, his father was gone. But his relief was short-lived, because the real battle was just beginning. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out, hands shaking as he typed a message to Mia. "I kicked my father out. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm going to fix myself. For you, for our baby." He hit send, knowing he had a long way to go. But for the first time, he was taking a step in the right direction. Mia sat curled up on Zoe's couch, staring at her phone screen. Ryan's message was still unread. She had seen the notification hours ago but couldn't bring herself to open it. What was there to say? That she was relieved he had kicked Patrick out? That it changed nothing? That it changed everything? A part of her wanted to believe he was serious about fixing himself, about being a better man. But another part, the part still aching from the slap, still reeling from the betrayal, was too afraid to trust him again. Zoe sat beside her, setting down 2 mugs of tea. "You don't have to respond," she said gently, reading Mia's thoughts as if they were written on her face. "You don't owe him anything." Mia exhaled, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I know," she murmured. "But if he really is trying to change?" She trailed off, shaking her head. Did it even matter? He had already crossed a line that should never be crossed. Love didn't erase that. Promises didn't undo it. The next few days blurred together. Mia focused on work at the community center, throwing herself into helping struggling families, anything to keep her mind off Ryan. But it was impossible to ignore the constant nausea and exhaustion, the telltale signs of the life growing inside her. Every time she placed a protective hand on her stomach, she was reminded that this wasn't just about her and Ryan anymore. It was about the baby. Finally, she made a decision. She wouldn't return to Ryan. Not yet, maybe not ever. But he had a right to know their child, and if she was going to co-parent with him, she needed to be sure he was serious about change. Taking a deep breath, she opened his message and replied. Actions, not words. Show me you're serious. The response came quickly. Ryan had already started therapy. He sent a screenshot of his first appointment confirmation, proof that he wasn't just making empty promises. A week later, he asked to meet. Not to beg, not to rush her, but to talk. On her terms. She agreed, but with strict conditions. A public place, no pressure, no expectations. They met at a quiet cafe by the water, the same one where they had shared their first date. The familiarity was almost painful. Ryan looked exhausted, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, but there was something different about him. The arrogance was gone. The anger was gone. I know I can't undo what I did, he said quietly, hands clasped on the table. But I will never be that person again. Not for you, not for our baby. Mia studied him, searching for any sign of the man who had hurt her, but all she saw was regret and determination. She wasn't ready to trust him, but maybe, just maybe, she was ready to see if he could prove himself. Mia sat across from Ryan at the small coastal cafe, the salty breeze drifting in through the open windows. This place had once been theirs, where they had spent endless afternoons laughing, dreaming, and falling in love. Now, it felt like unfamiliar territory, a place haunted by memories of who they used to be. She watched as Ryan nervously traced the rim of his coffee cup, his fingers fidgeting in a way she had never seen before. He looked different. Not just exhausted, but humbled. The weight of what he had done, what he had nearly lost, was written all over his face. He had asked to meet, and she had agreed. Not because she was ready to forgive him, but because their child's future was tied to his choices. Ryan cleared his throat, breaking the silence first. I know you don't trust me, and I don't blame you. His voice was steady, but there was a rawness in his tone that made Mia's chest tighten. I wanted to say this in person. I'm in therapy. Individual sessions twice a week. I've been unpacking everything, my father, my anger, how I let him control my life. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and slid something across the table toward her. A business card. A family therapist's name printed on it. I already scheduled a consultation. For us. If you're willing. Mia picked up the card, her fingers running over the embossed print. Couples counseling. The idea of sitting in a room with Ryan dissecting their marriage was overwhelming, but wasn't this what she had asked for? Actions, not words? Ryan leaned forward slightly, his gaze locked onto hers. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to take me back. But I need you to know that I will never let my father or anyone control me again. He let out a shaky breath. And I will never hurt you again, Mia. I swear on our baby. The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. She wanted to believe him, but trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. It had to be earned, slowly, carefully, one step at a time. Mia finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. I'm not coming home today, Ryan. I don't know when, if I ever will. She saw the flicker of pain in his expression, but he nodded, accepting her words instead of fighting them. But I'll do therapy with you, for our child. Relief softened the tension in his shoulders, but he didn't push for more. Instead, he asked, Can I come to the next doctor's appointment? Mia hesitated. Letting him back into her life, even in small ways, felt like stepping onto fragile ice. But this wasn't just about them anymore. It was about the tiny life growing inside her. Finally, she gave a small nod. Yes. But Zoe comes too. Ryan exhaled, his lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile, but held the smallest hint of hope. Of course. As she left the cafe, Mia still didn't know if this was the start of something new or the slow, careful ending of something broken beyond repair. But for now, she was willing to find out. Mia had barely stepped into her office at the community center when her phone buzzed. Zoe's name flashed across the screen. She frowned, answering immediately. "What's wrong?" Zoe's voice was tense. "It's Patrick. He's outside." A chill ran down Mia's spine. She turned toward the front window, and there he was, standing across the street, arms crossed, his sharp eyes locked on the building like a predator stalking prey. Her stomach churned. She had expected him to retaliate after Ryan threw him out, but she hadn't expected him to show up here. Zoe's voice hardened. "Do you want me to call Ryan?" Mia swallowed, her heart pounding. No, she would handle this herself. She was done being afraid. Taking a deep breath, she squared her shoulders and pushed open the front door. The salty breeze of the ocean hit her as she stepped onto the sidewalk, facing the man who had been poisoning her life for too long. "What are you doing here, Patrick?" Her voice was steady, even though her pulse was racing. Patrick smirked. "Just checking in, making sure my grandchild isn't being raised by a woman who ruins families." Mia's fingers clenched into fists. "You need to leave." Patrick let out a dry laugh. "Oh, I don't think so. Ryan might be too weak to see it, but I know exactly what you're doing. You're turning him against me. You trapped him with this baby, and now you're making sure he can't even think for himself." His voice dropped to a cold whisper. "But I won't let you destroy him like you destroyed this family." Mia's stomach twisted with anger and disgust. She had spent too long staying quiet, trying to keep the peace. But not anymore. She pulled out her phone, holding it up so he could see the screen. "I'm calling the police." Patrick's smirk faltered. "You wouldn't. Try me." Behind her, Zoe and a few of their co-workers had stepped outside, watching the scene unfold. Mia wasn't alone anymore. Patrick took a step back, his expression darkening. For the first time he looked uncertain. Then, with a sneer, he spat. "This isn't over." But as she watched him storm off toward his car, Mia knew the truth. It was over. That night, she and Ryan filed for a restraining order, and this time, Patrick wouldn't be able to manipulate his way back into their lives. Mia had just settled into bed at Zoe's apartment when a sharp, twisting pain shot through her stomach. She gasped, clutching her belly as another wave of discomfort rolled over her. "Not yet. It's too early." Her breath quickened as realization dawned. She was going into labor. Zoe rushed into the room at the sound of her pained cry. "Mia? What's wrong?" Mia squeezed her eyes shut, a deep pressure building inside her. "The baby. Something's happening." Without hesitation, Zoe grabbed her keys and helped Mia into the car. The drive to the hospital felt endless, every contraction stealing Mia's breath. She tried to stay calm, tried to focus on anything other than the fear creeping in. She wasn't ready, not for this, not for Ryan to be there. But when she arrived at the emergency entrance, Ryan was already waiting. Zoe must have called him. The moment their eyes met, his face twisted with emotion. "Mia!" He rushed to her side, carefully helping her into a wheelchair. His hands were gentle, cautious, as if he knew she could push him away at any moment. But she didn't. Hours blurred together in a haze of pain and exhaustion. Through it all, Ryan never left her side. He wiped the sweat from her forehead, whispered encouragement, and when her grip tightened around his hand, he didn't flinch. For the first time in months, Mia saw no hesitation in his eyes. no doubt, just unwavering support. And then, after one final push, a piercing cry filled the delivery room. Mia collapsed back against the pillows, tears sliding down her cheeks as the doctor placed a tiny, wriggling baby on her chest. Their son. Their miracle. Ryan let out a choked breath, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch the baby's tiny fingers. "Noah," he whispered. "His name is Noah." Mia looked down at their son, his delicate features, his perfect little hands, the life they had fought so hard to protect. And for the first time in a long time, hope didn't feel so impossible. As she cradled Noah close, she felt the weight of the past months pressing against her. The pain, the fear, the uncertainty. Ryan had been by her side today, but did that mean he had changed? Was he truly ready for the kind of father he promised to be? She turned to Ryan, exhaustion thick in her voice. "This doesn't mean everything is fixed." Ryan met her gaze, nodding. "I know," he said softly, "but it means I'll spend the rest of my life proving I deserve this chance." Mia didn't respond right away, but as she looked down at Noah, their son, their second chance, she knew the real test had only just begun. The first few weeks after Noah's birth were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and cautious steps toward an uncertain future. Mia was still living at Zoe's apartment, but Ryan visited daily, showing up with groceries, fresh clothes for Noah, and an unwavering determination to prove he was no longer the man who had hurt her. He never pushed, never overstepped. When he held Noah, it was with a quiet reverence, as if he understood just how close he had come to losing everything, and maybe he did. One afternoon, as Mia rocked Noah to sleep in Zoe's living room, Ryan sat across from her, his hands clasped together. "I know I can't undo what I did," he said, his voice quiet but steady, "but I want to build something better. Not just for Noah, but for you too." Mia studied him, searching for the man she had once trusted so deeply. She had seen glimpses of him again in the past few weeks, the way he read parenting books without being asked, how he never shied away from late-night feedings, the fact that he was still attending therapy twice a week. This wasn't just talk. He was doing the work. But was it enough? "I need time," Mia admitted, "and boundaries. We co-parent, we go to counseling, but I'm not ready to come home." Ryan nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "I'll wait, however long it takes." As the days turned into weeks, something unexpected happened. Peace settled into Mia's life. Without Patrick's looming presence, without the constant stress of trying to earn Ryan's love, she felt lighter, stronger. She was no longer just surviving, she was living. Then, one morning, a letter arrived from her lawyer. Patrick had violated the restraining order. Again. He had been caught lurking near the community center, attempting to ask around about Noah. But this time, Ryan was the one who took action. Before Mia even had to ask, he filed for an extension of the restraining order, ensuring that Patrick would never be a threat to their family again. Mia held the paperwork in her hands, staring at Ryan across the kitchen table. He had chosen her. He had chosen Noah. He had finally chosen himself. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something new. As Noah cooed in his bassinet beside them, Ryan reached for her hand. He didn't squeeze, didn't pull, just waited. And this time, Mia didn't pull away. Maybe their past was broken, but their future? That was theirs to rewrite. The story of Mia and Ryan teaches a powerful lesson about breaking cycles, rebuilding trust, and choosing what's best for oneself and loved ones. Mia's journey is a testament to the importance of recognizing red flags in a relationship. standing up against manipulation, and refusing to accept toxic patterns, no matter how deeply ingrained they are. Her decision to leave after Ryan's violence was not just about protecting herself, but about ensuring that her child would never grow up in a household where love and abuse coexisted. Ryan's transformation, on the other hand, highlights that change is possible, but only when someone truly acknowledges their mistakes and commits to doing the hard work. Words and apologies mean nothing without action, and his journey through therapy, setting boundaries with Patrick, and consistently proving his growth over time showed that redemption is earned, not given freely. Most importantly, the story emphasizes that forgiveness does not mean forgetting. Mia's cautious steps toward Ryan weren't about returning to the past, but about ensuring a healthier future. Whether or not a relationship can heal after betrayal depends on consistent actions, respect, and the willingness to truly change.